You're watching Beyond Market. Welcome. I'm Esther Awoni. Many thanks for joining us today. On today's show, we'll explore the top tech trends to watch out for in Africa this year. As always, you can join the conversation on social media. Let me know what you think about the topics that we discuss. And to do so, you can use the hashtag Beyond Market. You can also send me a message on Twitter. On my handle, it's at Esther O. Awoni. Now, in the past few years, fintechs have gained a stronger hold with the disruption supported by an increased deployment of the Internet of Things, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. So what trends will shape Africa's tech space this year, and what skills will be the most sought after? Uzoma Dozie, founder and CEO of Sparkle, joins me for today's discussion. Uzoma, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Pleasure
Esther.
to have you, and of course, good to have you back on the show again. We have a lot to talk about today.
Okay.
I was telling you earlier that I was looking at the top tech trends globally and for Africa, and there's just this big difference. But before we dabble into that, I wanted to just like to hear your thoughts on what you would describe was as the most defining moment for the tech space in 2019.
No, I think that's a very wide question because you can look at it globally, Africa or
Let's do Africa then.
Yeah,
let's do Africa.
And there are quite a few quite a few things that have been happening. Like there's drone technology, virtual and mixed reality, payments. But I think the one that has been defining, I think, is that payment space where there are multiple options that are beginning to evolve. And you can see that a lot of fintech companies have, increased their valuations and come up to actually do things in that do things in that space. So there have been a lot of technologies that are coming out, but I think in Africa, what is key is scale. How can we scale these things and democratize them so people can actually take advantage of them? And I think one to watch out for is probably chatbots. And chatbots are using artificial intelligence to provide services for people at scale at a cost-effective manner, especially as people, the use of smartphones and proliferation of data increases. Now,
one thing that struck me about last year was the increase in venture capital for fintechs, the amount of funding that came in for fintechs, and Nigeria getting a large chunk. Nigeria, Kenya, of course, the usual hubs, getting a large chunk of that money, and projections and forecasts for this year are even higher. So obviously there's a lot of optimism and there's a lot of momentum growing around that. Can you speak to that point, where this capital that's coming in and how that could help change? We'll now have our first unicorn here in Nigeria on the continent, but here in Nigeria also, how that could drive the space this year?
Well, there are many use cases in which technology can transform lives, especially where there's an opportunity to leapfrog, and where, as they say, where there's infrastructural deficiencies, there's some technology that can actually help solve the problem. You only have to look at power. So I do not think that we can create transmission lines. We can deliver power to people in the traditional way we used to before. So we have to look at different ways. Solar power and the way to distribute and pay for that. Education is the same. I don't think we're going to go back to the era where books are going to be hardback. They're going to be paperless. They're going to be distributed electronically. 5G is going to bring a way of immersive learning, which is going to allow people to actually visually see instead of reading stuff. So these are the things that people see. They're trying to solve a problem in the agricultural space, in the medical space, and then we have the scale, we have the people. And so with an enabling environment and enabling policies, I think investors see that this is one of the last bastions where they could invest early and multiply their returns later.
Now, Uzoma, there have been a number of forecasts for this year. Some people have their top 10, top 20 trends that will shape the space here in Africa. But then on the list, I still saw artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, there's 5G, there's even democratization of data, etc. But for you, for Africa, or perhaps even for Nigeria, if we can narrow it down, what are those trends that you expect, that you foresee shaping the space this year?
So I'm interested in things that will scale.
Okay.
There are many things that people that are already deployed in Nigeria, but it's the ones that can scale, the ones that we can use to to provide or transform the masses. People at the bottom of the pyramid. And one is, payment. And in that payment space, we're looking at NFC, near field communication. And basically, if anybody who has driven past the toll gate, it's just tap and go. Now, imagine if you could use your debit card to do that. So you wouldn't have to get a Lekki card for the Lekki Road and another card for the toll gate. So, and also Central Bank has come up with a new policy in which all debit cards that are created in 2020, from 2020 will have NFC enabled.
Okay.
NFC enabled. And in most smartphones today, most smartphones, those capabilities are there. So imagine if you have a uniform standard, it would mean that you could actually, with your debit card linked to your mobile phone, or your debit card having those capabilities, you can make payments. Quickly, especially if you go to the retail shop. And if you have devices that can capture that, your point of sale, which can also be a mobile phone. So imagine going to the marketplace. So it means that from cash, you now have a solution that is safe and secure, but also as fast as cash. Now, one of the problems of cash, problems of electronic payments is that it's not as convenient and as versatile as cash. But now, with the combination of point of sale, NFC, you can see that you can see possibilities there. And especially as, there are new policies that are going to drive this. There's cashless policy. There's also the Finance Act that, that favors the inclusiveness of small businesses. So if you're, for a good one, if you are generating less than 25 million naira a year in revenues, you'll be tax exempt. But to do that, you have to prove that. And the only way to prove that is to show your records. And one way to show your records is to be digitally enabled to your payments. So I really see a lot of promise there, especially with the enabling laws and legislation that it's going to facilitate and promote that. The second one is artificial intelligence, which is already in existence, but I think with pressures on cost and efficiency, that will drive. And artificial intelligence is, for example, two areas. Your chatbots that you see, and a few banks and a few organizations are beginning to use that on their web browser and their apps. So if you go to open a website, you see a little chat link there. Now, quite a few of these are actually robots actually answering your basic questions or executing your request, commands, your request before anything complex goes to human being. So what that does is just reduces your workforce immediately. But they are executing these things much faster than humans, more accurately, and also learning about you as well. So
sometimes I get a sense that it's just because within the business community, this is not just when we talk about trends. I'm also talking about how the business community is also preparing and how it will affect business in general. Yeah. When we talk about artificial intelligence, I get a sense that it's mostly, at least in our own situation here in Nigeria, the banks who appear to be deploying it. But what about, businesses, the whole corporate world in general? Are we seeing that traction?
We're not seeing that traction yet, but you're beginning to see that traction in other businesses, like small businesses. So you will go to some websites where someone is actually a designer, creating clothes, or even food as well. And these things are very cost effective to enable. And if you do the maths, it is easier, right, to deploy these robotic solutions than hiring people first. So those are your first step to reduce keep your costs down and capture data. Because one of the things that is going to be a competitive advantage for businesses is those who understand their customers, have more data on their customers, and can proactively
and personal profiling, analytics,
serve them. And so we like that. And then on the back end as well is robotic process automation, which is robots actually doing all the processing for you. So if you take banking, for example, where there's a lot of processing, you can wipe out that whole back office and have robots that actually do these things. And they're not just simple transactions. An interesting part is reconciliations. When a customer has something, a transaction has gone wrong, sometimes it requires people going into 3 or 4 different siloed systems to actually solve the problem. Robots can do that in a fraction of the time. So instead of reconciling over a 3-day period, it's done in an hour. So those are the things those are some of the areas where you're going to see a lot of change. And then the ones to watch out for are, things like drone technology in agriculture, virtual and mixed reality, which is happening now in terms of education. How do you show, if instead of building, for example, a chemistry lab, you can actually use virtual reality to show children how things work in the chemistry lab, and that's why people are excited about 5G, because 5G now enables businesses to transform the way they serve their community. I was talking to someone in the telco space. I was asking them, 5G requires 5G phones, and most people can afford that. And so how are they going to enjoy those services? And he goes, well, it's beyond that. I mean, you can have a 5G enabled environment, which, for example, will allow someone to give a lecture somewhere in the UK, for example, via his hologram. So he's there, you can see him, and you can see him actually doing the lecture.
We've heard a lot about what 5G can do, the capabilities of 5G, but I get a sense that right now, it's for us in Africa, maybe Nigeria also, it's just purely aspirational at this point. We don't have the supporting infrastructure. I mean, we're still trying to properly scale up the 4G. I'm just wondering, 5G, is that a conversation that's going to be on the front burner for us this year, or we're just going to continue to scale, like you said, those that can scale?
So it's a conversation. I mean, so a couple of a few telcos who are testing their equipment for 5G readiness and trying to determine what the gaps are. But of course, 5G will always start in areas where it is easier to deploy. So, for example, cities like Lagos, where the equipment is near 5G ready, or will enjoy those businesses will enjoy those services. So it will be Ikoyi, Victoria Island first, Lekki, before you go to areas like Ikeja. So it will grow, it will start, but it will start in certain areas and continue to grow as equipment, because it's also dependent on the type of equipment that you have now and what the investment is going to require to get it to that level. But it is not. I mean, we were talking about 2020, 20 years ago, and 2020 is here today.
Indeed, it's here now. If you're just joining us, Uzoma Dozie, founder and CEO Sparkle, is our guest today on the show, and we've been exploring the top trends that will shape Africa's tech ecosystem this year. Uzoma, thank you for your time so far.
Thank you.
I'd like us to quickly dabble into the global tech trends this year. I saw quite a number of interesting features for this year. For instance, I saw human augmentation, distributed cloud, personal profiling. We talked about that. Of course, I also saw things like edge computing and, of course, the 5G network. I mean, when you hear things like human augmentation, where, I mean, people are having chips or things put into them to make them perform optimally, as humans, or maybe superhumans, if you will. I'm just wondering, I know that we are trying to scale on some things here within the tech space here in Africa, and I know that at the same time we keep talking about the opportunity to leapfrog, that's for Africa. But the world is not waiting. These things are happening, and many of them are happening at lightning speed. Businesses are taking advantage and using that to give themselves an edge. And it's still a global village. So that, saying that, okay, well, maybe we're a bit of light years away from those things, we still need to catch up at some point. So when you see these new trends globally, and you just take a look at what we're doing here in Africa, how does that make you feel? Are you telling yourself, yes, we'll catch up, or I mean, there's going to be some kind of a spillover. We'll catch up eventually.
Well, catching up. I think catching up is a term that you have to use carefully.
Is that not a fair way to describe it?
Because you would argue that when I came back, I remember when I came back from school in Nigeria, and I had a debit card in the UK, and I came back here and we didn't have cards. So I thought to myself, we have a lot of catching up to do, but we've actually leapfrogged, because technology is actually redefining what we mean by catch up. So, and it's also evolving. So what we don't benefit now we might because we're not ready for some things. We're not ready for some things. And when you think that we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution right now, But in areas like Nigeria, where we haven't gone beyond the second industrial revolution, there's no power, there's no computing. And so it's going to be, we're going to benefit from it, but in certain areas of the country, not the whole. In some cities that are ready. So Lagos State, for example, will benefit from 5G much faster than some areas in Nigeria. And these things will have a spillover effect. But it won't be, and even in the UK, internet connectivity is not everywhere like people think. There's some areas where it is actually it is relatively poor, and even the government is now coercing the big networks to ensure that they provide total connectivity,
democratization of
technology. So that's a clear example where it has to be private and public sector working together to achieve that for the.
Now, is it also possible? Because I know that we talk about Nigeria. Obviously, we're also a big tech hub, but I'm just also thinking perhaps other places like Kenya, some could also be more ready than we are and could be the first to take advantage even before Nigeria.
So let me give you a very simple example. A very simple example is Lagos is actually one of the places that I can actually walk around with my mobile phone and not need to carry cash to make payments. I'm talking about globally. There's some parts of the world I won't be able to be. So that just shows you that some areas, there's some cities, and I can do that very comfortably in Victoria Island and Ikoyi and probably Ikeja. In other parts, it might be challenging. So there are pockets in this city where these things can be achieved. Now, when you think that, remember that we have over 20 million people. That is, so you have the number of people to provide these services and actually make a big difference. And things like everything like human augmentation, they happen, but the difference between developed and developing countries is the scale at which it happens. So Kenya has been very good at scaling mobile money. In Nigeria, mobile money hasn't been successful, but I'll tell you, the banking industry has democratized access to accounts with BVN, with the ability to open an account in a very cost-effective manner.
Our financial inclusion drive, I know we're stronger than that.
Exactly. So there are a lot of, and if you look at drone technology, it's actually being used quite well in the agricultural sector in Nigeria. So there are quite a few companies that are actually set up and actually using drone to get information about the soil, to actually spray and do things much quicker, more effectively. And so it's a question of how you use also all these things, how you bring all these things together to actually create business cases. And Africa is one of those places where we will benefit from these things. And a typical example is using robots to carry out medical procedures, especially when the doctor can't travel, but he can use assisted with robots can actually perform procedures. They happen, but not as much as.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the cost of that because we still have some quite a few fundamental issues that still need to be
like power, for example.
Power that still need to be taken care of before we begin, and that's why many people think that way. When we talk about all these big things, all these new things happening on the tech space, and then you just match that side by side with some of the basic problems we're still trying to solve that we should have solved by now, and one just wonders if we should be focusing on those or both can happen simultaneously. Can that happen?
I think we're focusing on them. If you look at, the different stakeholders that are required to make it happen are beginning to see the opportunities in should I say, changing the mindset as to how we progress as a country. We've seen some regulations. So we're reviewing the data policies because you need that to enable digital growth. Central bank, from a payments perspective, is doing a lot of things. And even Lagos is talking about smart city, where they are inviting people to help develop these cities that will be
sustainable in the future.
In the future, yes.
When I was looking at the global trend on the global scale, I saw this part where it says global business is building a stronger foundation for social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. It's called SMAC. and they're actually even going beyond that now. So it brings me back to our own business climate here in Nigeria and even Africa. Are you seeing, have we laid that foundation? Is business strong on that, and can we begin to scale beyond that?
So business, I mean, and there's some businesses that are doing that. I know, and financial sector is one area, and I will keep going back to this financial sector, but that's the area that I know. But that is also the lifeline of other businesses, of many businesses. And there are many decisions that are beginning to be, we're using less humans and more of systems. One, because the customer is evolved, customers' needs and sophistication is evolving, and you can't train people fast enough to do that. And we are now beginning to, instead of doing it for customers, people actually want to do things by themselves, regardless of what the industry is. I want to be able to order food when I want to order food. I want to be able to, I don't want to go to a restaurant. I want to actually order food in. So so you have many organizations that are beginning to provide these services that gives people more freedom.
Just the overall convenience of it.
Exactly.
And speaking about the newer trends too, and how some small businesses are using tech to also disrupt the space. I know Sparkle, you're also doing a couple of things in that space too. Could you just talk to us briefly about that?
So everything we've talked about so far, we're trying to use existing technology to, make life easier and more convenient for people and lower their costs. So Sparkle is a digital lifestyle service with financial capabilities. In layman's terms, it's a digital bank. But what we're trying to do that is different. We're trying to provide, make it easier for small businesses and individuals to go about their daily life. So today, the generation coming, the generation coming is not going to want to go into a bank. So we're making sure that first you don't have to go into a physical location. You can do things on your mobile phone, because we are now a mobile-driven, mobile-first.
That is happening already. I know a number of the banks are already
exactly.
trying
So
to
they're doing that on the
okay.
individual side, but not on the small business, not on the small business side. Secondly, we're incorporating business support services into our solution. So unlike for example, where you would have to get a tax consultant to help you with your taxation as a small business, which is actually which is timely, and especially with changing tax laws. With Sparkle, you won't have to do that because it is actually integrated into the solution. So we're integrating those those solutions that sometimes people find difficult to maneuver around, and enabling the platform. So you just go about doing exactly what you're good at, which is running your business. And unlike large corporates have relationship officers that people that look after them. Small business individuals, we've already, I think, conquered that. People can actually self-serve themselves. But small businesses are a different segment because they require a combination of human and machine intervention, because with over close to 40 million businesses out there, it's not going to be a human-driven solution, and it's going to be more of a technology with a bit of human to actually help ensure that we have a sustainable small business area. And it's very, very key, because small businesses are the engine of growth in any economy. And if we can play our own role in driving that social development, I just imagine if we have 10 million sustainable businesses, and each hire one person, that's 10 million employed. And that goes a long way in, solving the unemployment problem, driving GDP growth, because when you hire, you pay, and that's another area for consumption, and somebody's manufacturing to do that. And so we're very excited about Sparkle, because if you also look at what's happening, how people are setting up businesses today, before you would go and find an office, and then you go to the CAC to find out if you could, to get your name, then you go to the tax office, you see that CAC, FIRS, they've all upped their game, so you can actually do that online.
So this platform at Sparkle helps a small business take care of all of that using
we're working, as a platform, we're working with other different partners to make it easier for businesses to go about their business and be competitive as well.
Okay. How excited are you about funding coming into the continent this year? fintechs like we saw in 2019?
It's great because it just shows that people are seeing the potential in Nigeria and seeing the entrepreneurial and innovation of Nigeria. The other side of it is that why is it money coming in and not money that is already here? Because we have a wealthy population that could actually invest. So we need to do a lot in educating and creating awareness before we find out that all our unicorns are owned by foreign companies. So for me that's a wake-up call.
All right, Uzoma, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's a pleasure having you on the show. I've been speaking to Uzoma Dozie. He's a founder and CEO of Sparkle, and we've been looking at the top trends in the tech space in Africa this year. That's our program for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website at cnbcafrica.com. My name is Esther Awuni. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.